On a heavily rainy day, Lord Dago's wife was about to give birth to their child. In pain, she struggled to look toward Buddha, silently praying for herself. Outside, Lord Dago was contemplating deeply, as if calculating something. Going back about 3 hours earlier, the Lord had ridden his horse through the rain to reach a nearby temple. Passing through several small shrines, he stopped at a place called Hell's Path. Inside, a high monk had been waiting for him for a long time. The monk slowly turned around and asked Lord Dago once more if he dared to abandon Buddha and fall into the demon's path. This also meant that he would no longer be human, and hell would always be waiting for him. Dago replied that he didn't care about that. Weren't they already living in hell anyway? With that, Dago killed the monk with a single sword strike. Before dying, the monk thanked Dago, as this was his liberation, and advised Dago not to surrender to evil. Immediately after, Dago spoke the terms of an agreement with the 12 moon demons, 12 demons ruling over hell. Because famine and disease had killed many residents in Dago's territory, he wanted to make a pact. If the demons could help him protect his territory and rule the world, he would offer everything he had. As he finished speaking, a strong wind extinguished the candles, and a massive lightning bolt struck the temple. Thus, his pact with the demons was successfully sealed. Returning to the present, just as the child was born, a lightning bolt suddenly struck. The midwife's assistant fled in terror. Lord Dago entered the room and asked what had happened. The lady had successfully given birth to a boy, but all his limbs and face had been taken by the demons. Now he was nothing more than a skeleton. When Lord Dago saw this, he laughed, knowing that the pact between him and the demons had been fulfilled. He ordered the midwife to take the child to the river and drown him, despite his wife's tears and pleas. Before leaving, the Lord noticed that a nearby Bodhisattva statue had been struck by lightning, breaking its head. The midwife said that the statue had sacrificed itself to give the child a small chance of survival. When the midwife took the child to the river to drown him, she saw 2 streams of red tears flowing from his eyes. Unable to go through with it, she placed the boy on a nearby boat, leaving him to fend for himself. Just then, a monster appeared behind her and killed her instantly. A blind monk who was wandering nearby sensed the soul of evil. He approached and easily defeated the demon with a single slash. The commotion on the boat then caught his attention. This thing was neither human nor monster. He could smell something that had been cursed. Dago's territory, after suffering from many famines, began to develop again. 16 years later, during a time when war broke out everywhere, human life was worth less than a pebble on the ground. A monk who was praying for the souls of the dead saw a man below attaching prosthetic limbs to a corpse. He was known as Jukai, who specialized in fitting prosthetic limbs for the dead for their burial. The scene changes to a small town where a little girl was selling goods on the street. The girl introduced her merchandise skillfully, including a kimono once worn by a princess and a sake bottle from the legend of Yamada no Arachi. All unique items, and buyers would even get a few dried fish as a bonus. But before she could do anything, Dororo was surrounded by a group of large men. They claimed they had felt sorry for her and asked her to watch their belongings, only to find that she had stolen from them. Dororo threw a bottle at the bearded man and quickly ran away. On the other side of the river, a child who had slipped was caught by a hand. The boy bowed in thanks and asked if there was a festival today because the brother who saved him was wearing a mask. Back to Dororo, she had successfully evaded the men, even leaving them some horse manure. She reached the riverbank to wash her hands and unexpectedly found a cute puppy. With compassion, Dororo intended to give it some dried fish, but was caught by the bearded man. He used the puppy as hostage to make Dororo submit. As expected, the girl was beaten by the group of men. Refusing to yield, she picked up a stone and threw it directly at the bearded man's face. His eyes bled, which angered him to the extreme. Without another word, he immediately drowned the girl. His henchmen noticed a strange young man on the bridge and reported to his boss. They didn't know what he was looking at. They only saw that his face and eyes looked like a doll's, very eerie. Dororo realized he was looking at something behind them. That thing gradually approached them, then pounced and ate the bearded man. Terrified, the other 2 quickly fled but couldn't escape the demon's grasp. Dororo dragged her injured body but was too slow. Fortunately, the young man intervened just in time to rescue her. Remarkably, he had no hands. Instead, there was a sword inside. Despite the monster's fierce attacks, he could easily dodge them all. The fragile bridge collapsed soon after. The young man successfully eliminated the monster, and from the rubble, he picked up a sword. Dororo ran over and reattached his arms. Suddenly his whole body trembled, and his mask fell off, revealing his face had returned to normal. From previous indications, this young man was the boy born to Lady Dago. Frightened, Dororo asked if he was human, but of course, he couldn't answer. At that time, traveling was equivalent to risking one's life. people could get lost, injured, or threatened by illness. Therefore, it was not unusual for travelers to disappear without a trace. The blind old man from before was also a traveler. Despite being blind, he could recognize the light before him as a demon. Back to Dororo, she continued to follow the protagonist throughout the journey. Dororo didn't understand how he could fight so powerfully while seeing nothing. The protagonist stopped by a bush and picked wild fruit to eat. He kept putting fruit into his mouth while Dororo talked incessantly. Next, he went to a stream and repeatedly stabbed into the lake. Soon, fish filled his sword. He was about to eat the fish raw but was stopped by Dororo. She ran up the bank and quickly started a fire to grill the fish. Shortly after, the aroma spread throughout the forest, and Dororo gave the protagonist some to eat to ease his hunger. Now we learn that his name is Hyakkimaru. According to the story, Hyakkimaru could neither see nor hear what Dororo was saying. But there was one thing he could see since birth: the flame of souls. The key was in the colors. Enemies, hatred, and creatures not of this world. Hyakkimaru could identify dangers by their colors. Along with this power, he possessed extraordinary sensory perception and physical strength. That's how he survived and overcame the frightening darkness. He kept Dororo by his side because the color of her soul didn't reveal any danger. Nevertheless, this soul didn't just pass by but stayed close to him. And for Hyakkimaru, this was the second soul to do so. Night fell, and when Dororo was sleeping, she had a nightmare that woke her up. Seeing Hyakkimaru in front of her gave her some reassurance. Although she was a bit disappointed that Hyakkimaru couldn't hear what she was saying, she still continuously talked to him. Eventually, unable to fight her drowsiness, she fell asleep on the ground. The next morning, when Dororo returned with fruit, she told Hyakkimaru how they could make money. It was by eliminating the demons that were killing innocent people out there. They went to a nearby village where, according to rumors, a demon had appeared. When the word demon was mentioned, an elderly man quickly came to greet them. He asked the girl if she could really kill demons. With her cleverness and intelligence, Hyakkimaru received his first demon hunting job. Moreover, Denkichi entertained them very hospitably. It was the first time Dororo could eat and drink so freely. Suddenly the lamp went out, and appearing right after was the bell-wielding monster that the traveling monk had encountered earlier. Dororo was very frightened, but Hyakkimaru remained strangely calm. The girl tried to get Hyakkimaru to act, but he didn't respond at all. Strangely, the monster only asked them one question: "Do you want to?" Then left immediately. The next morning, Denkichi woke them up early because the village head, Bandai, wanted to meet them. After bringing them there, Denkichi immediately left. Upon seeing the village head's face, Dororo froze for a moment. She couldn't believe the village head was so beautiful. Suddenly Hyakkimaru became alert and immediately drew his sword, ready to fight. Dororo tried to stop him, thinking the village head was human. Soon after, villagers also rushed in to control Hyakkimaru. Both were quickly escorted to the storehouse, where someone was already waiting. It turned out to be the traveling monk. He was glad to have more companions. The monk had also come here after hearing about the monster, only to be captured by the villagers while sleeping. Although he didn't know the reason, he guessed it might be a clue as to why people had been disappearing. The master also revealed that, like Hyakkimaru, he too could see things that people with vision couldn't see. For example, Dororo appeared to him as a pure white flame. Suddenly both sensed something abnormal. Hyakkimaru got into a fighting stance, and as soon as he saw the demon's arm, he lunged forward, cut it off, and jumped down the well without hesitation. The old man pulled Dororo down the well, and passing through the dark basement, they appeared in the village head's courtyard. She was quite surprised that Hyakkimaru had come to attack her again. Dororo asked the old man what color he saw emanating from her. It was a dark red, the worst color. Being discovered, she revealed her true form as an extremely ugly demon. Hyakkimaru attacked, but was pierced through his body by her tentacles. Even so, Hyakkimaru managed to slash the demon twice. He was about to kill the monster when suddenly a blanket covered him. It was Denkichi, who had come to help the demon escape. Hyakkimaru pursued immediately. Dororo confronted the man, asking why he did that, and whether the traveling guests who came to the village had been eaten by the monster. Denkichi fearfully admitted that it was the only way to prevent her from eating the villagers. There was another reason he wasn't comfortable sharing. Meanwhile, the monster, feeling unable to escape, attacked Hyakkimaru with bamboo stalks. In a moment of the demon's distraction, Hyakkimaru slashed its face twice. The demon fell, but its true form was just revealed. However, Hyakkimaru didn't give it a chance to transform and killed it immediately. The big-headed demon also appeared but vanished right after. When Dororo ran to where the demon vanished, she found a pile of gold. It turned out to be the money from the traveling guests whom Denkichi had fed to the demon. Because the village was occupied by the demon and couldn't make money, He had to feed traveling guests to the demon to establish a pact. Suddenly, he heard the bell of the first traveling guest, which caused him pain. After eliminating the demons, the three continued their journey. Dororo was a bit sad because the Bandai demon somewhat resembled her deceased mother. Hyakkimaru, seeing Dororo's color, approached and touched her face, then sat down and wrote his name on the ground. Only then did the old man realize that he was the baby who had been set adrift on the river years ago. Suddenly, Hyakkimaru's body reacted violently as if another sense had returned to him. War had ravaged the land of Japan for many years. The earth was soaked with the smell of fresh blood. For the survivors, their miserable moans echoed in all directions. The defeated suffered torture from the victors. They were crucified, had their ears cut off, tendons pulled, an extremely tragic situation. Uncle Jukai was also forced to perform these actions, and his mind completely collapsed when a woman was killed before him. Unable to endure this torment, Jukai accepted death as liberation. This is part of Uncle Jukai's story. Long ago, Jukai was a doctor in a small village. Everyone in the village was grateful to him and viewed him as a savior. Those who lost limbs came to him for help one by one. He had a student named Koname, and it was he who gave the boy motivation to continue living. Koname always appreciated the life Jukai had given him and vowed to serve him until the end of his days. That was before Koname heard the rumors about Jukai. One rainy day, Koname went to get wood and came across a boy in pain with a severed arm. Without hesitation, Koname carried the boy home for Jukai to treat. The wound was serious but treatable. After leaving, Koname escorted the mother and son for a while, and that's when he heard rumors about Jukai from the woman. Returning home with a despondent face, Koname asked his master if he had once served under Lord Shibai. It was then that Jukai told his student about how he had attempted to drown himself, but was fortunately rescued by a strange ship. Afterward, he came to this country and learned how to make prosthetic limbs for those who had lost them. He didn't guarantee it was a way to atone, but he couldn't forgive himself if he died peacefully as if nothing had happened. Jukai should have died but was saved. Perhaps the gods wanted him to live to repay some of the karma he had created. Trembling, Koname said that during the battle with the Shiba clan, his father had been brutally killed. With that, Koname lunged at Jukai with a knife, intending to avenge his father. Jukai begged Koname to let him fulfill his promise to the boy first, and then Koname could do whatever he wanted with him. Though very angry, he agreed to Jukai's request. The next day, the boy had regained the arm he had lost. The promise fulfilled. Koname didn't take Jukai's life, but threw away his prosthetic leg and left immediately. Looking at that prosthetic leg, Jukai couldn't hold back his tears and cried loudly. Later, he went out for a walk and coincidentally found a terrifying-looking child. Unable to bear watching the child die, he took it home to care for. A year later, Lady Daigo gave birth to another boy, who would be Daigo's heir. 6 years later, Hyakkimaru had grown up healthy under Jukai's care. His current form was also created by Jukai. Since meeting Hyakkimaru, Jukai felt reborn. He loved and cared for him like his own son. Although Hyakkimaru had lost all his body parts, he had great strength in return, a strong will and desire to live. The name Hyakkimaru was also given by him. During a playdate, he accidentally encountered a wolf demon. It lunged at him, but Hyakkimaru dodged it completely. Immediately after, Jukai threw an axe at the monster, wounding it and causing it to flee. When night fell, Hyakkimaru sensed danger on the roof. It was the monster. It was then that Jukai realized Hyakkimaru had the ability to attract monsters. So the very next day, Jukai hurriedly taught him how to fight. Spring passed and summer came for many consecutive years, and Hyakkimaru still diligently practiced swordsmanship. Whether it was the cold winter or the hot summer, Hyakkimaru never lost heart. Day by day, the number of monsters he killed increased, and accordingly, his strength became exceptional. Witnessing Hyakkimaru kill without mercy made Jukai wonder if he had made another wrong decision. And during one of Hyakkimaru's monster-killing episodes, Jukai discovered the secret about his body. The severed right leg suddenly grew back after Hyakkimaru eliminated the monster. It was then that Jukai learned that Hyakkimaru's body had been taken by hungry ghosts, and he had made sword arms for Hyakkimaru. To not hold Hyakkimaru back, Jukai decided to let him set out to eliminate monsters, regain his entire body, and find his biological parents. Before leaving, Hyakkimaru touched Jukai's face, wanting to remember it. Returning to the present, Hyakkimaru had regained the sensation of pain. Perhaps too excited, he stomped his right foot into the fire. And now Jukai was on a journey to apologize for the past he had created. At a small shrine, a street vendor girl was praying for her brother on the battlefield. He had been gone for 5 years without any news. Suddenly, she saw Hyakkimaru standing in the rain, deep in thought. She tried to ask if he needed help, but was stopped by Dororo, because he couldn't hear anything. Hyakimaru had been standing there for half an hour without making any movement. The girl guessed that he was trying to listen to the rain. Dororo was surprised by her thought and guessed that she must be from a wealthy family. With her elegant words and refined feminine face, she couldn't be a country girl. The girl didn't answer the question but gently replied that it was a thing of the past. Suddenly, a man appeared near the shrine, and Hyakimaru detected a dark red color. The man had a fatal slash on his back, perhaps just attacked by someone. Immediately, Hyakimaru rushed toward the enemy. When they arrived, Dororo was shocked by this horrific scene. All the passers-by had been brutally killed. Right after, he lunged out to attack Hyakimaru. The sword in his hand was a cursed one. It was a living sword that needed to drink human blood to increase its power. Dororo scolded him, saying he was just blaming the sword, as the disgusting smile on his face said it all. Immediately after, he lunged to attack Hyakimaru frantically. However, those crude sword strikes didn't trouble him. Hyakimaru easily defended against those attacks. Suddenly, he said that the sword in Hyakimaru's hand was exactly like his. Both had demons dwelling within. With that, he changed his attack method and wounded Hyakimaru's face. He was driven to the foot of the mountain, seemingly with no escape. But at the moment the man thrust his sword toward his leg, Hyakimaru quickly cut off the sword and caused him to fall down the cliff. A while later, Dororo went to look for Hyakimaru's leg and accidentally touched the sword. At the foot of the mountain, the girl from earlier passed by the killer, but to her surprise, it was her brother. When Hyakimaru went to find Dororo, she was nowhere to be seen, and the sword had also disappeared without a trace. After being carefully tended to, the killer finally regained consciousness. His sister Asushi was very happy that her brother had finally returned. As for Dororo, the girl was being controlled by the sword, heading towards the village. Suddenly 2 men on patrol appeared. As expected, the sword controlled the girl to attack the 2 men. Dororo tried to resist but ultimately had to succumb to the terrifying power of the sword. Meanwhile, the killer had guessed that the sword would return to him. By now, Dororo was very tired from being controlled. She was delighted to see Hyakimaru standing before her. But that joy quickly vanished when Hyakimaru drew his sword. Over at Asushi's side, she was still trying to persuade her brother to return home and stay away from the battlefield. Going back to Tanasuke's past, the day he was forced to choose between killing or being killed. He begged his lord to reconsider the order, but it was of no use. Because of his promise to his sister and his ambition to survive, Tanasuke took his lord's sword and killed all the hostages. It was a rusty sword, but after being bathed in human blood, it became unusually sharp. The hostages couldn't satisfy the sword's thirst for blood. Tanasuke pointed the sword at his lord and killed him along with his army. Back to the present, when he sensed the sword nearby, Tanasuke was about to leave but was stopped by his sister. At the same time, Hyakimaru didn't recognize Dororo and had attacked her. Dororo fled in panic, but her speed was too slow compared to Hyakimaru. After just a few exchanges, Hyakimaru had finally knocked the sword out of Dororo's hand. Because she had been controlled for many hours, the girl fainted immediately afterward. Tanasuke had regained the sword. He ultimately chose the path of the demon rather than retaining his humanity. The battle between Hyakimaru and Tanasuke broke out once again. This time, Hyakimaru was still overwhelmed by him, forcing him to continuously defend. But he didn't expect that Hyakimaru still had another sword and successfully defeated him. Asushi held her brother's arm in distress and cried loudly. Along with the demon and the sword being eliminated, Dororo regained her hearing. Finally, he could hear the sound of the rain and thousands of other sounds. After hearing returned to his body, Hyakimaru still couldn't get used to the sounds echoing in his ears. Although this was a good thing, it also brought a terrifying experience for him. There were too many mixed sounds, and he didn't know which one to listen to. Suddenly, Hyakimaru sensed danger and immediately pushed Dororo away. It was a monster bird, its size much larger than a normal bird. Because it was a new type of attack, Hyakimaru hadn't adapted yet. He couldn't predict the monster's attack direction to dodge. Dororo reminded him not to pay attention to the sound, and at the moment the bird dove down to attack again. Hyakimaru successfully slashed its face. However, he was also scratched and significantly wounded. The monster continued to dive down to attack. But fortunately, the traveling monk arrived just in time and killed the monster. Hyakimaru's condition was becoming more serious as he couldn't hear what Dororo was saying. Dororo was really worried about him. If only there was some medicine here, it would be so much better. Dororo wanted to go to a nearby village to find medicine, but was stopped by the master, as he knew there was a smoldering war there. The Sakai clan ruling this land had betrayed their allies, leading to a widespread war. Dororo spoke too loudly, causing Hyakimaru pain as he tightly covered his ears. Now he was just like a wounded animal hiding in a cave. to help him gradually adapt to human life. The traveling monk forced him to listen to all the surrounding sounds. Nevertheless, receiving such a large amount of sound had tired Hyakkimaru out, and he fell asleep shortly after. Early the next morning, Hyakkimaru hurriedly left. He followed a melodious singing voice and stopped by a lake. It turned out that the voice belonged to this girl. Hyakkimaru quickly approached and reached out to touch her. The girl was also very concerned about him and repeatedly asked if he was injured. Hyakkimaru's health was currently very weak. Right after, the master and Dororo also arrived. They brought Hyakkimaru to the girl's house for better care. The monk also recognized the girl's voice as Mio's. She was the one who cared for and nurtured orphan children. Not only were they orphaned, but the children were also missing body parts due to the brutal wars that broke out. A child named Takibo told Mio to go to sleep and leave everything to them. Right after, another child brought a bowl of soup for Dororo. After eating, Dororo wanted to help Takibo with his work to repay the bowl of food from earlier. According to the boy, Mio worked at night, serving the Sakai army in exchange for food and supplies. The work was arduous, but in return, the children didn't starve to death. At the same time, the Sakai army at the border was at a standstill. The situation had reached a deadlock. If this continued, Lord Dago would have to send more supplies, and in the past month, there hadn't been any rain. If they didn't store up from now, the food supply would gradually be depleted. At this moment, Lady Dago stepped out and said, first it was the conflict with Lord Sakai, and now it was the drought. It was as if the past was returning. Going back to Dororo, she had now integrated with the children. Although Hyakkimaru was still feverish, he was much better than before. Right after, Mio also went to work. Early the next morning, Hyakkimaru sat at the gate waiting for Mio to return. She was a bit shy when Hyakkimaru stared at her as if he could see deep inside Mio. Right after, Dororo also came out and explained to Mio about the colors of souls. Suddenly, Hyakkimaru touched Mio's lips and wanted to hear her sing. It seemed that her song made him feel warm. If he heard her sing more, Hyakkimaru might get used to human sounds. When the singing began, Hyakkimaru listened attentively. It was a short but beautiful song. At the same time, the master had also returned with good and bad news. He had found a perfect place for everyone to take refuge when the war broke out. The soil, water, and trees had no issues. However, something was occupying that place. It was a demon, one that the monk wasn't confident he could defeat. Hearing this, Hyakkimaru immediately stood up to eliminate the demon. Feeling uneasy, the master hurriedly followed behind Hyakkimaru. Knowing there was such a good place, Mio also decided to work harder. She decided that from today, she would work for both enemy and friendly forces. Hearing this, Dororo decided to follow Mio tonight. Night gradually fell, and Mio went to find two guards to do something. Meanwhile, when Hyakkimaru confirmed the monster's presence, he was ready to fight. However, before they could do anything, both were pulled down by the monster. Hyakkimaru moved nimbly across the rocks and lunged to attack the monster. The monk also joined the battle. Taking advantage of the opportunity, he distracted the monster, and Hyakkimaru stabbed forcefully into its chest. But before falling, it managed to bite Hyakkimaru's leg, forcing the old man to dive down to save him. As for Dororo, she had seen a horrifying scene when following Mio, and the job Mio had mentioned turned out to be prostitution. Meanwhile, Hyakkimaru's voice finally returned after he eliminated the monster. At this moment, he was in great pain because his leg had been bitten off by the monster. Immediately after discovering Mio's secret, Dororo hastily left. Along the way, she saw blood and encountered the old man with the injured Hyakkimaru. Now he had regained his voice, but his right leg had also been bitten off by the monster. The next morning, Mio had returned. She brought food but had many wounds on her body. When asked by Takibo, she only gave a vague answer and diverted to another topic. Then she discovered the blood in the yard and hurriedly ran inside to check on Hyakkimaru. Mio ignored her wounds and tired body to care for Hyakkimaru. Recalling the scene from the previous night, Dororo couldn't hide her disgust and ran outside. Takibo followed and asked what had happened. Dororo asked if he had ever seen Mio at work. Takibo replied no, because he couldn't leave the children unattended. Whatever Mio's job was, Takibo dared not complain because they all lived thanks to Mio. Takibo's dream was to own lush rice fields. Their fragrance was wonderful, and above all, they could eat to their heart's content. Seeing the smile on Takibo's face, Dororo couldn't bear to tell him what she had seen. Meanwhile, Lord Dago's second son, Tahomaru, was insistently demanding to go to the battlefield. And of course, his father's answer was no. In anger, he rode his horse outside. He knew his parents were hiding something. Since he was young, his mother had always devoted all her heart to something other than caring for him. His father was always sneaking out at midnight. Tahomaru really wanted to know the secret they were hiding. Back to Hyakkimaru, he had woken up from his coma. Then he tried to walk with a crutch but failed. Seeing him fall, Mio was extremely worried. Afterward, she sang to him to reduce his tension. Indeed, her voice soothed Hyakkimaru's mind. The anger and pain disappeared from his face. Seeing this scene, the master decided to leave. He would make a detour to the monster's place. According to the old man, the demon flame had been inside Hyakkimaru since he was a child. It could be seen as the remnants left after the demons took his body. Inside the house, Hyakkimaru suddenly touched Mio's face. Strangely, she felt warmth from Hyakkimaru's wooden hands. It was also time for Mio to go to work. She knew that Dororo had followed her the previous night. Mio said she wouldn't feel ashamed of this job because it was the straw that saved her and the children's lives. Mio was quite surprised that Dororo knew about her job at such a young age. At this, Dororo's face saddened as she said, it was a job her mother absolutely refused to do, no matter how hungry they were. But because of that, her mother had passed away. Dororo greatly admired her mother, but Mio's desire to live was even more worthy of respect. Mio was deeply moved by Dororo's encouragement. Then both left to do their work. Dororo went inside the house and fed Hyakkimaru. She fed him too quickly, nearly causing him to choke. After eating, he continued to make himself a prosthetic leg. Early the next morning, Mio continued to go to work. It seemed she was trying very hard. Right after, the children took Hyakkimaru to the weapons storage, where there were many swords from defeated samurai. When night fell, Hyakkimaru once again went to challenge the previous monster. The battle was very tense, but this time Hyakkimaru judged the monster's attack direction better. He dodged better and counterattacked more easily. Hyakkimaru's severed leg had a sword attached to it, allowing him to successfully ambush the monster. Finally, Hyakkimaru easily defeated the monster amid Dororo's shouts. After eliminating the monster, the thunderstorm also dissipated, and he and Dororo returned to the temple. Suddenly, they both noticed smoke rising from the temple. Feeling something was wrong, they rushed back. Indeed, the children had been killed by a group of soldiers, and the temple was also burned down. The reason was that they suspected Mio was a spy for the Sakai army. Because she worked for both sides, it had aroused their suspicion. Dororo ran towards Mio in distress, but was thrown away by a soldier. Without hesitation, he thrust his spear towards Dororo, but fortunately, Hyakkimaru returned just in time to save the girl. Seeing Mio's soul gradually fading away, along with Dororo's anguished screams, Hyakkimaru finally couldn't contain his anger and slaughtered everyone. This was the first time he had been so angry. His screams were filled with pain. All the guards were no match for him. They were all easily killed. Witnessing this scene, Dororo was very scared, as if the demon inside Hyakkimaru had been released. Dororo quickly ran to stop Hyakkimaru from killing the last one. She didn't want him to become a real monster. Only when Dororo showed the rice grains that Mio had exchanged her life for did Hyakkimaru calm down. For the first time, Hyakkimaru knew how to cry, knew how to hurt for someone. He embraced Mio and gently called her name. The next morning, after arranging everything properly for Mio and the children, Hyakkimaru and Dororo continued their journey. After Mio's death, Hyakkimaru always kept her memento with him. To make Hyakkimaru smile, Dororo tickled him, but it had no effect. Suddenly, she heard a strange sound and looked up. It was a spider monster. Hyakkimaru quickly drew his sword and attacked the monster, successfully saving a middle-aged man who was fortunately only suffering from the monster's hallucinogenic poison. After the first slash, the monster became aware of its enemy and quickly counterattacked. However, it had no effect on Hyakkimaru. He easily dodged and cut off the monster's arm. Finding itself in a difficult position, the monster shot out a large amount of silk, binding Hyakkimaru to a tree, then quickly escaped. The two lost track of the monster but spotted a nearby village. The monster hadn't gone far. It was still watching Hyakkimaru and waiting for a chance to take revenge. Because a kidnapper had been lurking around the village recently, the villagers had to stand guard and issue directives to make passes for visitors. Hearing this, Dororo immediately knew that the culprit was the spider spirit they had encountered earlier. The next day, a man fetching water unexpectedly found a girl who had fainted by the roadside. She looked very pale and haggard. Even breathing was difficult for her. The kind young man offered to take her home to care for and treat her. The young man's name was Yajiro, and the girl's name was Ohagi. When Yajiro brought a bowl of hot rice for Ohagi, she looked at it with contempt, but after tasting it, she couldn't stop eating. It was unusually delicious to her. Ohagi asked Yajiro why he wasn't eating, but he had already given his portion to her, so there was no rice left. After saying this, he left Ohagi to rest while he went out to work. On Dororo's side, the two had traveled quite a distance before stopping at a crowded place. Yajiro was also present there. He looked at the notice board and told Dororo that it said whoever found the kidnapper would receive a reward. Hearing this, Dororo smiled because her prediction was correct. The girl confidently said the reward was definitely in their hands because she knew who the culprit was, and additionally, she had Hyakkimaru to eliminate the monster. Under the scorching hot weather, the villagers were working hard. Suddenly, an unfortunate accident occurred. A man was crushed by a rock and died on the spot. Night fell, and it was time for Dororo and Hyakkimaru to hunt demons. As for Ohagi, she was confirmed to be the spider demon in disguise. Shortly after, Yujiro returned and brought rice for her to eat. This was the first time she had met such a strange human. When night fell and Yujiro was asleep, she intended to eat him. Suddenly, she stopped this action and picked up the bowl of rice to eat. It was surprising that a monster would spare the prey right in front of it. Dororo and Hyakkimaru had been searching all night, but still couldn't find any trace of the spider demon. Both were very tired, so they lay down to sleep. The next day, the notice board mentioned another disappearance, and the reward increased accordingly. After searching all night, Hyakkimaru and Dororo were now very hungry. Dororo would likely go find more food before they both fainted there. As for the spider demon, after many days without eating men, it had become very weak, its face gaunt and lifeless. Yujiro didn't know what to do as her condition was getting worse. The village had no doctor, and she didn't have a pass to leave the village. Actually, the spider demon could easily leave on her own, but she wanted to stay here a little longer with Yujiro. He might be a bit weird, but he made her feel warm and at ease. This was also the first time she yearned to live like a human. The two planned to find a doctor in another village when night fell. As for Dororo, she and Hyakkimaru still had to eat wild grass. Dororo decided that tonight she would catch the monster because this was their last chance. As planned, Yujiro pulled Ohagi along a secret path to leave the village. Coincidentally, that path was where Hyakkimaru and Dororo were standing. Recognizing the familiar voice, Dororo immediately guessed that the girl before them was the spider demon. Suddenly, Yujiro stood in front of Ohagi and said to spare her because he was the kidnapper. Right after, the guards also arrived and learned that Yujiro was the culprit. The leader immediately ordered Yujiro's arrest for execution. At this moment, the monster revealed itself, shooting silk toward the guards, and thus the two unfortunate men had their energy drained immediately. Ohagi now showed a red color, so Hyakkimaru began to take action. But before he could do anything, he was ambushed by Ohagi, who escaped. She pulled Yujiro and climbed to the top of the mountain. Trembling, Yujiro asked Ohagi if all the men whose energy she had drained were killed. Ohagi replied that they were still alive, and after a period of time, their energy would recover. This was called regeneration. Hearing this, Yujiro was overjoyed and sighed with relief. Afterward, he led her to a secret passage for her to hide in. Inside, there was a natural lake, and the living conditions were very suitable for her characteristics. But just as the two were about to go inside, Yujiro was suddenly hit by an arrow from the guards. They brazenly attacked the person she loved right in front of her, causing her rage to flare up. Ohagi didn't care anymore and directly transformed into a monster to fight. At this moment, Hyakkimaru rushed out to save the three guards and successfully cut off her arm. But he was also kicked away when trying to approach again. The monster very much wanted to leave to find a doctor to treat Yujiro, but Hyakkimaru wouldn't let that happen. Suddenly, Yujiro's weak voice rang out. Ohagi, you have never and will never kill, right? Unexpectedly, her soul began to fade, and the red color also disappeared. Hyakkimaru had stopped his hand. They had successfully gone through the secret passage and escaped the guards' pursuit. Through this incident, Dororo realized that anything in the world could happen. Humans and monsters truly have an emotion called love. With everything settled, Hyakkimaru and Dororo continued their journey to find Hyakkimaru's body. It was surprising that Hyakkimaru truly smiled when he heard Dororo's jokes. In a small village, after a thunderstorm passed, disaster struck. The village head immediately sensed that it was the Nakasurgumo phenomenon and ordered the villagers to immediately prepare a bride. Simply put, Nakasurgumo was a nameless cloud that always hovered everywhere in the sky. Because it brought calamity, people called it the cursed cloud. The very next morning, the villagers had prepared a bride for the cursed cloud. Dororo thought it was a happy wedding, but looking at her sad face was truly heartbreaking. Suddenly, a boy lunged down from the cliff and shot an arrow toward the bride. He was the girl's brother and was trying to save his sister. Dororo, not yet knowing their situation, tried to stop the boy. So annoyed, he almost hit Dororo. But when he heard about Hyakkimaru being a monster killer, he calmed down and told the two the story of Nakasurgumo. From ancient times, that evil cloud frequently appeared and ate people. One day, the villagers offered it a bride so it wouldn't eat others anymore. And then it obediently left. Since then, whenever it came, people would offer it a bride. And now, the boy's sister was the next chosen one. Hearing this, Dororo felt this was a good deal and made a pact with the boy. If Hyakkimaru eliminated the monster and successfully rescued the boy's sister, the gold the boy possessed would belong to her. Immediately after, they began to act. Taking advantage of the two guards not paying attention, Dororo and Soru knocked them out. Just a few minutes later, the monster reappeared. The two foolish guards screamed in fear, so the monster sucked them straight up into the sky. The next moment, they fell to the ground and couldn't avoid being torn apart. Hyakkimaru's vision was now shrouded by a wall of evil fire. This black cloud was a part of the demon. He didn't know how to attack because this was also the first time he couldn't see anything. Suddenly, a giant centipede swooped down from the sky towards Soru. The sister quickly pushed her brother away but was swallowed by the monster. Its next target was Hyakkimaru, but Hyakkimaru was now very panicked. Suddenly, a large column of water shot up, creating a shield for them and successfully driving the monster away. The sky returned to normal, but the pain of losing his sister left Soru speechless. Soru took his sister's clothes back to his cave. He had always lived here alone since he was young. He had no parents, and even the sister from before wasn't his biological sister. The mountains were his friends, and he hated humans. They said the mountain didn't belong to him and drove him away. Day after day, month after month, he always had to find ways to escape the villagers. Suddenly one day, his sister appeared and helped him bandage his wounds. Looking at her gentle smile, Soru immediately felt all his troubles forgotten. He wished she was his mother at some point. Now he didn't have time to grieve because he had to avenge his sister. Saying is easy but doing is hard. They couldn't do anything when Hyakkimaru couldn't see inside the cloud. Worse, the centipede molted again, and each time it molted, it would get bigger. Suddenly, Dororo remembered that the centipede had avoided sunlight, which meant it was very afraid of sunlight. This was the turning point for them to eliminate the monster. The next morning, Dororo disguised herself as a bride to lure the monster. Although she knew it was very large before, Dororo was still amazed by this crazy size. Right after, she jumped into the hole that had been dug earlier, then continued to run forward to lure the monster. Indeed, it fell into the trap and continuously chased her. Just as Dororo successfully escaped, Soru acted. The boy shot a fire arrow at the monster to ignite the oil they had poured earlier. The fire blazed fiercely but didn't harm the monster at all. However, that was just bait to let sunlight infiltrate below. Just when the plan seemed to be succeeding, the monster suddenly spewed out a large amount of gas, covering the sunlight. At this moment, Hyakkimaru appeared and shot arrows at the monster. As it approached, Hyakkimaru jumped up and slashed its right eye. Although he lost his vision in the wall of fire, he had located the monster by listening to the sound of the arrow hitting it. The monster now regained consciousness and knocked Hyakkimaru away. Quick thinking, Dororo grabbed a coil of rope and jumped onto the monster's head to create sound for Hyakkimaru. The monster tried to thrash against the rocks, causing Dororo to faint. Hyakkimaru tried to shout loudly to call Dororo to wake up. He endured the monster's attacks to try to wake Dororo. Fortunately, she woke up and helped Hyakkimaru identify the monster's remaining eye. Without hesitation, he thrust his sword into its eye and successfully wounded it severely. The monster tried to swallow Hyakkimaru in the final moments, but his blade sliced through its body. Finally, they succeeded in eliminating the monster. Remarkably, Soru's sister was still alive after being swallowed by the monster. At this moment, Hyakkimaru's body also reacted. His nose had returned to normal. After saying goodbye to the two siblings, Hyakkimaru and Dororo set off again to continue their journey. After regaining his nose, Hyakkimaru continuously smelled various flowers. Even when Dororo approached, he pulled her in to sniff repeatedly. Suddenly, Dororo collapsed to the ground, her face turning red. She had developed a high fever after the strenuous days. Hyakkimaru carried her on his back to find help. He met a middle-aged man, but because he couldn't communicate, the man left. Right after, he also met an old farmer, but the man wasn't willing to help either. Hyakkimaru couldn't do anything, helplessly letting the girl lie down under a tree canopy. Fortunately, a nun was passing by and helped the two. The nun took the girl to the temple and cared for her. At this point, Dororo woke up and panicked when she didn't see Hyakkimaru anywhere. Only when the nun said he had just gone to fetch water did she calm down. Dororo suddenly said she hated red spider lilies. They reminded her of her deceased mother. When she was young, Dororo had a desire to go to the battlefield like her father. Her father was a leader of a famous gang in the area. Suddenly one day, they were attacked by samurai, so Dororo and her mother fled. That battle was truly intense. Many of her father's gang had died, but they didn't surrender because of that. As a leader, Dororo's father was very strong in combat. With his spear, he broke through the enemy's encirclement. and successfully killed all the ambushing samurai. Because their location had been discovered, he asked everyone to gather to move elsewhere. In that era, masterless samurai were always in extreme terror for the people. They brazenly killed and exploited the weak without anyone managing them. Hibikiro's gang were simple farmers, and they only attacked samurai. Dororo asked her father why they only attacked samurai. He replied that it was to teach them a lesson for daring to attack villages and kill their loved ones. And during an ambush on an enemy squad, Hibikiro was betrayed by his subordinate and was backed into a corner. The subordinate had forgotten his dark past and agreed to join the samurai corps. Hibikiro's gang disbanded, and his leg was severely injured. Dragging his tired and worn-out body, they searched for food on dirty corpses. The scene here was no different from hell for someone of Dororo's age. As days passed, the samurai's evil deeds continued. Any village they passed through was burnt to the ground. Just as Dororo's family was about to leave, they were discovered by the samurai. Without many words, they directly drew their swords to attack. Hibikiro tried to resist. He exerted all his strength to attack quickly before he was exhausted. One by one, they were killed by him. But unfortunately, a samurai stabbed him from behind when he wasn't paying attention. Finally, he struggled to die together with the enemy. Witnessing her father being killed before her eyes made Dororo unable to contain her emotions. Afterward, the mother and child wandered everywhere, hoping to find a place to stay for a long time. Being starved for many days made the bodies of the mother and child increasingly weak. Suddenly one day, they encountered their mortal enemy, who was now enjoying the benefits bestowed by the Lord. At this point, hunger had made her not care about other matters. She bravely rushed forward to get food. Even without a bowl, she used her own hands as a container. The heat had made her hands blistered and red. Even so, she endured to feed Dororo. And then what was inevitable happened. Dororo's mother could no longer endure the physical torture, and she finally died in the middle of a field full of red spider lilies. Back to the present, Dororo had completely recovered after 3 days of high fever. The two continued their journey, resuming the unfinished adventure. On Lord Dago's side, he finally knew that the deformed child from that year was still alive. At a large lake, a man was trying to swim to a wooden board floating on the water. The lower part of his body had been severed, causing blood to spread everywhere. Suddenly, the lake created a whirlpool and pulled everything to the bottom. The unfortunate man was swallowed by a monster. Back to Lord Dago, he was inspecting food supplies under the blazing sun. For 2 months, this land had not received a drop of rain. If the drought continued, the harvest would surely be affected. Additionally, the neighboring Asakura clan was showing strange movements. They received reports that the enemy was quietly gathering soldiers at the border. If the situation went beyond control, they would be forced to act before the enemy could mobilize. Tahomaru was still full of suspicion toward his parents. He didn't believe he couldn't discover the secret they were hiding. Lord Dago again went to Hell's Path, looking at the demon statues around him, and couldn't help but marvel at Hyakkimaru's power. The demons now also reflected the true form of that child from years ago for him to see. Meanwhile, Hyakkimaru continued his demon hunting work. His clothes were stained with blood, so Dororo washed them for him. The girl had always wondered about the charm he carried with him. Hyakkimaru was also unsure about its origin. He only knew it was very important to him. Back to Tahomaru, after successfully capturing his father's close subordinate, he asked about the mission his father had assigned. That mission was to find the child who had been lost 16 years ago and the midwife. Tahomaru wanted to ask more, but the man bit his tongue in an attempt to commit suicide. To find the answer, Tahomaru went to meet Dago at the mountain top. He continuously urged his father to give an answer. Touching Dago's taboo, he bluntly scolded his son. Tahomaru could only swallow his resentment and run elsewhere. He ran to a place he used to frequent as a child. At that time, only 2 close subordinates could find him. Suddenly, he looked down below and saw villagers and guards scuffling with each other. Immediately after, he and his subordinates went down to check the situation. Seeing the young master arrive, a man knelt down and begged for help from Tahomaru. He said there was a monster in the lake that had eaten many men in the village. They couldn't do anything against that fierce and terrifying thing. Out of kindness, Tahomaru immediately agreed to help eliminate the monster for the villagers. When they rowed boats to the middle of the lake, the monster's movements appeared. Shortly after, ripples rose on the water surface, and the monster truly appeared. Because they had prepared in advance, their rafts were not swept away by the current, and this was also the time they had to fight. The monster grabbed a guard and swallowed him whole. Taking that opportunity, Tahomaru shortened the distance and jumped up to cut off its claw. Severely injured, the monster was forced to retreat beneath the lake surface. Before leaving, it still tried to attack the raft, forcing Tahomaru to flee to the shore. Hyoga suggested bringing explosives with them so that when the monster ate them, it would explode from within. It had a hard outer shell, but inside was soft. If it exploded from within, the monster would surely die. However, the bait person would also be blown to pieces along with the monster. Hearing this, Kiritsu volunteered to be the bait. He was confident he wouldn't die because of his oath to his master. Tahomaru pointed forward and said, "Look at this land. Green mountains, flowing streams, fields full of rice. That's what's happening in Dago's territory. But I hear that before I was born, it wasn't like this." At that time, continuous floods made the rice crops waterlogged, and people had to chew on tree roots to survive. And the person who made this land prosperous is my father, Lord Dago. As the son of the Lord, I swear I will eliminate any monster that harms this land. What I need from Hyoga and Kiritsu is not to die and to trust in your master. Suddenly, he realized something when looking down at the lake surface. Immediately, he ordered his subordinates to summon everyone. Tahomaru explained the way to defeat the monster to everyone. Although not simple, they would certainly win. But before that, he needed the villagers to work together. The work went very smoothly. Day by day, they got closer to the plan. It turned out he wanted to dig a canal to lure the monster there. The canal was finally completed, and the next step was to lure the monster. As expected, after seeing the raft, the monster quickly chased after it. After trapping the monster, Tahomaru immediately executed the plan to drain the water to isolate it. This place had many small lakes beside the main lake. He had connected the lake with a dam, and another dam played the role of draining water. Now that the monster was no longer underwater, it was time for them to launch a full attack. The monster roared angrily and attacked Tahomaru. Tahomaru quickly dodged and cut off its arm. Hyoga and Kiritsu were not inferior. They tried to cause as much damage as possible to the monster. The people outside were very excited when they saw the monster injured. They quickly rushed down to throw stones and created time for Tahomaru to deliver the finishing blow. Suddenly, the monster picked up a rock and threw it at the water-blocking gate. After just 2 stones, the gate had a large hole, and water immediately flooded in. To save the villagers from being swallowed, Kiritsu exerted all his strength to throw them onto the shore, but was swept away himself. Even so, Kiritsu still refused to succumb to the monster. He held on until Hyakimaru rushed out to deliver the final blow. Hyoga was safe, and they had successfully eliminated the monster. This was the first time the two brothers met, but they only passed by each other as they didn't know each other's identity. After reaching the shore, Tahomaru thanked Hyakimaru for saving his life. Seeing Hyakimaru remain silent made Tahomaru somewhat uncomfortable. Dororo quickly explained the situation. He was blind, but could see the colors of souls. Hearing he was blind made Hyoga and Kiritsu unable to hide their surprise. The two didn't expect Hyakimaru could fight with those eyes. Right after, Dororo demanded payment for eliminating the monster earlier. Receiving the reward, Dororo and Hyakimaru left to go to Dago's territory. Before leaving, Tahomaru had asked Hyakimaru's name. Along the way, Hyakimaru recalled the soul color of Tahomaru and felt somewhat familiar. Just as everyone had rumored, Dago's land was very prosperous. Trade here was bustling. Food and goods filled the stalls, but in a dark corner, there was a mad woman holding a child in her arms and continuously singing scary songs. Suddenly, she saw Hyakimaru and became extremely panicked, repeatedly saying, "The demon child has come," then ran away. Dororo, seeing white rice for the first time, couldn't hide her excitement. She then took Hyakimaru's hand and quickly ran toward the theatrical performance taking place. While watching the play, Dororo suddenly recognized the traveling old man in the crowd. The play went very smoothly, with enthusiastic applause from everyone. Going outside, Dororo had told the old man the whole story about Mio. The old man couldn't help but feel sorry for the tragic fate of that cherry blossom girl. Additionally, he came here because he was curious about this land. While everywhere else was still suffering from hunger and cold, this place was strangely prosperous. He also planned to climb that mountain because he heard the demons that Dago killed were kept there. The old man was about to leave when he suddenly saw darkness emanating from Hyakimaru. It was a sign of having killed people before. The old man didn't ask too much, but only advised both to be careful, then left. Hyakimaru and Dororo planned to play a bit in this place before moving to the next city. However, along the way, Hyakimaru was attracted by the story of two men. Seeing this, Dororo also approached to learn about the story they were telling. It was the story of Banman, a fortress protecting them from the Asakura clan. Previously, there had been a fierce battle. Everything was burned except for a single wall. But that was the first time Dago's army drove away the Asakura enemies, and his power also rose from there. People rumored that the bodhisattva that Lady Dago always prayed to had entered that wall. Recently, the Asakura army was growing stronger. They shot arrows at Dago's subordinates and spies, then pinned them to the wall. Since then, no one dared to approach that wall. It also became a story discussed and embellished by people everywhere. At this moment, Hyakkimaru touched the wall and sensed a thick killing intent surrounding it. It could be an extremely powerful demon god. Suddenly, a boy appeared behind and told Hyakkimaru and Dororo not to cross the wall, because on the other side were Asakura guards. If caught, they would definitely be pinned to the bandman wall. After knowing Hyakkimaru and Dororo came here to eliminate monsters, the boy told his story. This place was once the boy's village. Then suddenly one day, soldiers came and erected that bandman wall. The boy's parents also passed away on that day. The villagers had abandoned the village to flee, but the boy was determined to cross the wall to return home. Seeing his determination, Dororo offered to help. They would act at night because that's when the demons would appear. On Lady Dago's side, she finally knew that her son was still alive. Dago planned to eliminate Hyakkimaru, but was opposed by his wife. She didn't want her son to meet with disaster again just because of her husband's selfishness. However, those weak words couldn't change his decision. Back to Dororo, now the Asakura soldiers had also left. But this was also when the monster appeared. It was a fire spirit fox. They gathered in herds, so there were many. Hyakkimaru drew his sword and began to attack. He dealt with each one in just one strike, which angered the leader and made it summon all souls here. Hyakkimaru now removed his two swords to attack with full force. Dororo also ran to help. Taking that opportunity, the boy had crossed the wall to run forward. Because of this, Dororo fell to the ground and was in a dangerous situation. Fortunately, Hyakkimaru intervened in time to rescue the girl. Hyakkimaru told Dororo to go ahead, while he stayed to fight the monster. Now it had merged all souls and transformed into a giant fox spirit. Its fighting power increased tremendously, causing Hyakkimaru many difficulties. He was pinned down to the ground. At this time, Dororo was still looking for Sukeroku. Suddenly, she was discovered by Asakura soldiers, and Sukeroku had also been captured by them. In the dangerous moment, Hyakkimaru used all his strength to escape the monster's control. Suddenly, many arrows shot toward the monster, interrupting the battle between the two. The monster had also left immediately after, and it turned out the archer was Dago's subordinate. At the same time, Tahomaru was also on his way to finding the truth about the child who disappeared 16 years ago. It turned out that the mad woman at the street corner was the midwife from that year. She had gone mad after seeing Hyakkimaru's form. On Lord Dago's side, this was the first time father and son met again after a period of separation. Hyakkimaru suspiciously asked who he was and what purpose he had coming here. Immediately after, he proactively approached and gave him a scare. Until now, he still couldn't accept that Hyakkimaru was still alive. The paternal love in him had been thrown to the dogs. After that, he immediately ordered Hyakkimaru's execution. Because he didn't want to kill more people, he tried to escape. Nevertheless, Dago pursued him to the end. Hyakkimaru hid on a tree trunk to think about what Dago had said. He said the boy didn't deserve to be born, and he was a child of demons. At the same time, Dororo was being hung upside down on a tree by the guards. Without many words, they beat Dororo until she fainted. After waking up, Dororo found herself imprisoned with others. Sukeroku was also detained here. Fortunately, he was unharmed. Sukeroku recounted that he had returned to the village, but that place had long disappeared. Everything had been completely burnt, and there was no life. Dororo at this time could only console him to ease his sorrow. Now Dororo suddenly discovered that the family seal on the handkerchief of the uncle in front of her was identical to the one Hyakkimaru wore around his neck. It was the seal of the Dago clan. Right after, Dororo discovered a small escape route right above. She climbed up but unfortunately was seen by the guards. Inevitably, Sukeroku had to rush out to block the guards so she could escape. At the same time, Tahomaru was also gradually learning the truth about his brother. He was disappointed in his parents' actions. They truly didn't deserve to be parents. However, Dago also said that it was something they had to do, because this country had suffered too much. At that time, famines occurred continuously, disease, disasters, and natural calamities appeared constantly, and moreover, they had to face threats from neighboring regions. At that moment, this land only had death, and only the pact with demons could save this land. Suddenly, there was the sound of an assassin outside the gate. Surprisingly, it was Hyakkimaru. Seeing subordinates shooting arrows at Hyakkimaru, his mother screamed in fear. Hyakkimaru only came here to see his father once more, then quickly fled. Dago ordered Hyakkimaru to be killed at all costs, despite Tahomaru's advice. Hiding in the forest, Hyakkimaru kept recalling his parents' words. Suddenly, an exhausted Dororo came and told Hyakkimaru to quickly save Sukeroku. At this time, a guard came in to inform them that they were about to be hung on banman. ready for the general attack on Daigo's territory. On the mountaintop of the temple worshipping demons, the traveling elder had learned the true nature of Lord Daigo. He wasn't a demon slayer at all, but had made a pact with them. The traveling elder felt sorry for Hyakkimaru's fate and also admired him for his strong will to survive. At the same time, Tahomaru was also on his way to the Hell's Path Shrine. Along the way, they met the traveling master. He discovered that Tahomaru's soul was identical to Hyakkimaru's. At this time, Daigo's army was ready to join the battle. On the mountaintop, Tahomaru finally witnessed with his own eyes the demon gods who had stolen his brother away. Right at this moment, Dororo and Hyakkimaru were quickly rushing to Sukuroku. He was now about to be executed along with innocent villagers, and immediately after, a fierce battle took place. Hyakkimaru had also arrived, but was bound to fight with the fox spirits. They quickly joined the battle between the two countries. The troops on the Asakura side were devastated by the demons. Meeting again the person who had caused Mio's wrongful death, the emotions suppressed for so long in him erupted once more. Anger reached its peak, and he was about to rush forward to tear the man apart, but was stopped by Dororo. And only when Tahomaru called Hyakkimaru's name did he calm down. At this point, he had told Hyakkimaru why he had become like this. He believed that sacrificing Hyakkimaru in exchange for the nation's prosperity was the right thing to do. And the fact that Hyakkimaru survived was actually the work of demons. Right after, Tahomaru drew his sword and intended to kill his brother right there. Meanwhile, Dororo quickly ran to untie Sukuroku. The fox spirits had also reappeared. Inevitably, Dororo shouted loudly for Hyakkimaru's help. Hearing the cry for help, Hyakkimaru immediately pushed back his brother and quickly ran to Dororo. He used Banman as a stepping stone, then flew up to slice through the fox spirit immediately. Although it wasn't dead, it had been absorbed into Banman. After Hyakkimaru's slash just now, Tahomaru had been blinded in his right eye. At this time, Lady Daigo had also arrived. She said to Hyakkimaru, "You hate us a lot, don't you? That day, I couldn't save you. That's the biggest regret I've experienced. To exchange for the prosperity of many people, we made Hyakkimaru endure the pain that tore at both body and mind." She knew she was at fault with him, and to punish that, she had offered herself to the demon gods in place of Hyakkimaru. At this time, the Banman wall had shown strange anomalies. Daigo immediately ordered the army to retreat, and finally, the Banman wall also collapsed. Hyakkimaru's mood had also collapsed with it. He had 1,000 questions waiting to be answered. Fortunately, there was good news to soothe this heavy atmosphere. Sukuroku's family was still alive. Carrying a sad mood, Hyakkimaru and Dororo continued their unfinished journey.